helped him to get up and offered to take him where he wished to go. He thanked them and refused, saying he had only to cross the street. 4. He went up again, and this time he unlocked the door of Lara's flat. It was still light on the landing, no darker than before he had gone out. He was glad that the sun was not hurrying him. The creaking of the door touched off a commotion inside. The uninhabited flat greeted him with the clang and rattle of falling tin pans. Rats, scuttling off the shelves, plopped onto the floor and scattered. They must have bred here by the thousands. The doctor felt sick and helpless to deal with this abomination and decided to barricade himself for the night in one room with a closely fitting door, where he could stop the ratholes with broken glass. He turned left to the part of the flat that he did not know, crossed a dark passage, and came into a light room with 2 windows facing the street. Directly opposite the window was the grey building with the statues. Groups of people stood with their back to him, reading the announcements. The light in the room was of the same quality as outside. It was the same new, fresh evening light of early spring. This seemed to make the room a part of the street. The only difference was that Lara's bedroom, where he was standing, was colder than the street. His sudden weakness earlier that afternoon as he approached the town and walked through it an hour or 2 ago had made Yurii Andreevich think that he was ill, and had filled him with fears. Now, the sameness of the light in the house and in the street exhilarated him. Bathed in the same chilled air as the passers-by, he felt a kinship with them, an identity with the mood of the town, with life in the world. This dispelled his fears. He no longer thought he would be ill. The transparency of the spring evening, the all-penetrating light were a good omen, a promise of generous fulfillment of distant and far-reaching hopes. All would be well, he would achieve all he wanted in life, he would find and reunite and reconcile them all, he would think everything out and find all the right words. He waited for the joy of seeing Lara as an immediate proof that all the rest would follow. A wild excitement and an uncontrollable restlessness supplanted his earlier fatigue. In reality, this animation was an even surer symptom of approaching illness than his recent weakness. Yurii Andreevich could not sit still. Once again he felt the urge to go out. He wanted, before he settled down, to have a haircut and get rid of his beard. He had looked for a barber earlier, on his way through town. But some of the barber shops he had known before stood empty, others had changed hands and were used for other purposes, and those still in business were locked. He had no razor of his own. Scissors would have done the job, but though he turned everything upside down on Lara's dressing table, in his haste he did not find any. Now it occurred to him that there had once been a tailor's workshop in Spassky Street. If it still existed and he got to it before closing time, he might borrow a pair of scissors. He walked out. 5. His memory had not failed him. The workshop was still there, with its entrance from the street and a window running the width of the front. The seamstresses worked in full view of the passers-by. You could see right into the back of the room. It was packed with sewing women. In addition to the seamstresses, there were probably aging local ladies who knew how to sew and had obtained jobs in order to become entitled to the workbooks mentioned in the proclamation on the wall of the grey building. It was easy to tell them from the professionals. The workshop made nothing but army clothes. Padded trousers and jackets and party-colored fur coats, made of the skins of dogs of different breeds, such as Yurii Andreevich had seen on the partisans. This work, more suitable for furriers, was particularly hard on the amateurs, whose fingers looked all thumbs as they pushed the stiffly folded hems through the sewing machines. Yurii Andreevich knocked on the window and made signs that he wished to be let in. The women replied by signs that no private orders were accepted. He persisted. The women motioned him to go away and leave them alone, they had urgent work to do. One of them made a puzzled face, held up her hand, palm out, like a little boat, in a gesture of annoyance, and questioned with her eyes what on earth he wanted. He snipped 2 fingers like scissor blades. This was not understood. They decided it was some impertinence, that he was mimicking them and making fun of them. Standing out there, torn and tattered and behaving so oddly, he looked like a madman. The girls giggled and waved him on. At last he thought of going around the house, through the yard, and knocking on the back door. 6. It was opened by a dark, elderly, stern woman in a dark dress who might have been the head seamstress. "What a pest you are! Can't you leave us alone? Well, get on with it. What is it you want?" "I want scissors. Don't be so surprised. I'd like to borrow a pair of scissors to cut my hair and my beard. I could do it here and give 'em back to you at once, it wouldn't take a minute. I'd be terribly grateful." The woman looked astonished and mistrustful. She clearly doubted his sanity. "I've just arrived from a long journey. I wanted to get a haircut but there isn't a single barbershop open. So I thought I'd do it myself, but I haven't any scissors. Would you kindly lend me some?" "All right. I'll give you a haircut. But I warn you, if you've got something else in mind, any tricks such as changing your appearance to disguise yourself for political reasons, don't blame us if we report you. We are not risking our lives for you. For heaven's sake. What an idea." She let him in and took him into a side room little bigger than a closet. Next moment he was sitting in a chair with a sheet wrapped around him and tucked under his chin as at the barber's. The seamstress went out of the room and came back with a pair of scissors, a comb, clippers, a strap, and a razor. "I've done every kind of job in my life," she explained, noticing her client's astonishment. "At one time I was a hairdresser. I learned haircutting and shaving when I was a nurse in the other war. Now we'll snip off that beard and then we'll have a shave. Could you cut my hair very short, please?" "I'll do my best. Why are you pretending to be so ignorant, an educated man like you? As if you didn't know that we now count time by the decade and not by the week, and today is the 17th of the month, and the barbers have their day off on every date with a 7 in it. Honestly, I didn't know. I've told you, I've just come from a long way off. Why should I pretend anything? Don't fidget or you'll get cut. So you've just arrived. How did you come? On my feet. Along the highway? Partly that, partly along the railway track. I don't know how many trains I've seen, all buried in the snow. Luxury trains, special trains, every kind of train you can think of. There, just this little bit to snip off and it's finished. Family business? Heavens, no. I worked for a former union of credit cooperatives as their traveling inspector. They sent me on an inspection tour to eastern Siberia and there I got stuck. No chance of a train, as you know. There was nothing for it but to walk. 6 weeks, it took me. I can't begin to tell you all I've seen on the way. If I were you, I wouldn't begin. I see I'll have to teach you a thing or two. Have a look at yourself first. Here's a mirror. Get your hand out from under the sheet and hold it. All right? I don't think it's quite short enough. Couldn't you take off a bit more? It won't stay tidy if it's any shorter. As I was saying, don't start telling anything at all. It's better to keep your mouth shut. Credit cooperatives, luxury trains, inspection tours, forget all about such things. It isn't the moment for them. You could get into no end of trouble. Better pretend you are a doctor or a schoolteacher. There now, beard cut off, now we'll shave it clean. Just a spot of lather and you'll be 10 years younger. I'll go and boil the kettle. Whoever can she be? Yurii Andreevich wondered. He had a feeling he had some connection with her, something he had seen or heard, someone she reminded him of, but he could not think who it was. She came back with the hot water. Now we'll have a shave. As I was telling you, it's much better not to say a word. Speech is of silver, silence is gold. That has always been true. And your special trains and credit cooperatives better think of something else, say you are a doctor or a teacher. As for seeing sights, keep that to yourself. Whom are you going to impress these days? Am I hurting you? A little. It scrapes a bit, I know, it can't be helped. Just a little bit of patience, my dear man. Your skin isn't used to the razor and your beard is very coarse. It won't take a minute. Yes. There's nothing people haven't seen. They've been through everything. We've had our troubles, too. The things that went on under the whites. Murder, rape, abduction, manhunts. There was one little lordling who took a dislike to an ensign. He sent soldiers to ambush him in a wood outside the town, near Krapulski's house. They got him and disarmed him and took him under guard to Razville. In those days Razville was the same as the regional Cheka is nowadays, a place of execution. Why are you jerking your head like that? It scrapes, does it? I know, my dear, I know. It can't be helped. Your hair is just like bristles. There's just this one tough place. Well, the ensign's wife was in hysterics. Collier, Collier, what will become of my Collier? Off she went, straight to the top, to General Galiolin. That's in a manner of speaking, of course. She couldn't get straight to him. You had to pull strings. There was somebody in the next street over there who knew how to reach him, an exceptionally kind person, very sensitive, not like anyone else, always stood up for people. You can't think what went on all over the place, lynchings, atrocities, dramas of jealousy. Just as in Spanish novels. That's Lara she's talking about, thought Yurii Andreevich. But he kept prudently silent and did not ask for details. Her absurd remark about the Spanish novels again oddly reminded him of something precisely by its absurdity and irrelevance, but he still couldn't think what it was. Now, of course, it's all quite different. Admittedly there's any amount of investigations, informing, shooting, and so on. But the idea is quite different. To begin with, it's a new government, it's only just come into power, it hasn't got into its stride yet. And then, whatever you say, they are on the side of the common people, that's their strength. In our family we are 4 sisters, counting myself, all working women. It's natural that we should be drawn to them. One sister died. Her husband was a political exile, worked as manager at one of the local factories. Their son, my nephew, that is at the head of the peasant forces. He's quite a celebrity. So that's who she is, Yurii Andreevich realized. Liberius's aunt, Mikulitsin's sister-in-law, the one who is a local legend, barber seamstress signal woman jack of all trades. But he decided to say nothing so as not to give himself away. My nephew was always drawn to the people, ever since his childhood. He grew up among the workers at the factory. Perhaps you've heard of the Varikino factories? Now look at what I've done, fool that I am. Half your chin is smooth and the other half is bristly. That's what comes of talking. Why didn't you stop me? Now the lather's dry and the water is cold. I'll go and warm it up. When she came back, Yurii Andreevich asked, Varikino, That's somewhere miles out in the country, isn't it? That should have been safe enough in all these upheavals. Well, it wasn't exactly safe. They had it worse than we did in some ways. They had some sort of armed bands out there, nobody quite knows what they were. They didn't speak our language. They went through the place, house by house, shot everyone they found and went off again, without a by your leave. The corpses just stayed in the snow. That was in the winter, of course. Do stop jerking your head. I nearly cut you. You were saying your brother-in-law lived in Varikino. Was he there when all this happened? No. God is merciful. He and his wife got out in time. That's his second wife. Where they are, nobody knows, but it's certain that they escaped. There were some new people there as well, strangers from Moscow. They left even earlier. The younger of the two men, a doctor, the head of the family, he's missing. That's in a manner of speaking, of course. It was Khaled missing to spare their feelings. Actually he must be dead. Sure to have been killed. They kept looking and looking for him, but he never turned up. In the meantime the other one, the older of the two, he was called back home. A professor he was, an agronomist. The government called him back, I was told. They all stopped in Yurii on their way to Moscow, just before the whites came back. Now you're at it again, twisting and jerking. You really make me cut your throat. You get your money's worth out of your barber, my dear man.